Thank you, Les Concordia. Minister, students who sit their exams in June of next year will have missed out a considerable amount of class time due to the lockdown restrictions, and they will be the first Leaving Cert class that will actually sit a state exam, having never completed a state exam before that. And I think these two factors, along with the potential threat hanging over students of further restrictions, as well as the mental health challenges that every pupil and student in this country has faced, provides additional stress factors for this cohort of students.
Minister.
Thank you, Deputy, and I appreciate you putting this question to the floor. The Department is acutely aware of the disruption caused to students as a result of school closures as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. From the 11th of January 2021, all students, including students currently in 5th year and who are due to sit their Leaving Certificate exams in 2022, engaged in a programme of remote learning with their schools. Students in 5th year were prioritised, however, for a return to school following the return of 6th year students, and all students, as you're aware, Deputy, have now returned to school. The public health restrictions which resulted in the closure of schools in March 2020 highlighted the absolute necessity for schools to be agile in providing for continuity of schooling into the future. As a contingency measure against the possibility of partial or full school closures, the Department of Education provided a suite of guidance materials agreed with the education partners to enable schools to mediate the curriculum safely for all pupils and students in a COVID-19 context. The nature of distance learning, which was necessitated during the unprecedented closure of schools last year and early this year, required educators to take on a range of approaches to support their pupils' continuity of learning during that period. Assisted by department-funded resources and support, schools and teachers demonstrated enormous innovation in adapting to the unprecedented situation, including the use of digital technologies and online learning platforms for teaching and learning. A number of adjustments were made to assessment arrangements for the 2021 Leaving Certificate examinations to take direct account of the disruption to learning experienced by the students who are due to take these exams this year. I am particularly conscious that current 5th year students have also experienced some disruption to their learning, and this will absolutely be considered in determining the assessment arrangements for the 2022 state examinations.
Thanks, Minister. But the point I want to make is that this particular cohort of 5th year students who would sit the exams next year are very unique in that they never sat a state exam before. They haven't had the experience of the pressure involved in a state exam before because they didn't sit their junior cert exams. And these particular students need additional supports over the coming year. Now, I'd like to bring to your attention, Minister, that there has been a 58% increase in the number of children presenting to our emergency departments in the last 3 months of 2020 with anxiety, suicidal ideation and self-harm. Every single young person in this country has experienced additional anxiety as a result of COVID-19. And this is a challenge across our education system to deal with that. We don't need to put additional anxiety on this particular cohort of 5th year students in coping with a state exam.
Minister to respond.
Thank you, Deputy. Again, I want to reiterate that I am very, very conscious, indeed, as I was conscious this year, of the particular difficulties and stresses for students, throughout the COVID pandemic, and specifically just in that space of well-being and supports for students. I want to acknowledge that schools and everyone involved in the school community have very much so taken a well-being approach to supporting, to mentoring, to catering, to encouraging students in terms of school. We are all very, very conscious in the school community, and indeed, much of the advices and that in relation to well-being issues, as you have highlighted them, has been led by the NEP Psychologist programme, as we alluded to earlier. Specifically in relation to the current cohort of 5th year who will be Leaving Certificate students of next year, I want to be very clear, and I've said this previously, accommodations and suitable accommodations were made for the, in terms of assessment, were made for the Leaving Certificate class of 2021.
Thank you.
And currently consideration is being given to what supports can be put in place in terms of the assessment for students in 2022.
Thanks, Minister. And look, I acknowledge exactly what you're saying, but I think it is important that we also acknowledge that next year's Leaving Cert class, this year's fifth-year class, have a very, very unique set of circumstances, and additional supports need to be provided to them for that. Now, I think in general, Minister, we need to put additional supports and new approaches in place in order to deal with and prevent the growing mental health issues that we have among our students at primary and particularly at post-primary level. And like the pre-pandemic results from the Growing Up in Ireland study showed that students with higher depressive score at the age of 13 is associated with a greater chance of a diagnosis of depression at 17 or 18 years of age, and a greater likelihood of self-harm. So it is important that, and the wider school population, particularly at second level, that we have a very proactive, innovative approach across all of our schools to support them from a mental health perspective.
Minister, to conclude.
Thank you, Deputy. And again, I will reiterate the particular interest I have, as indeed you have yourself, in terms of the well-being experience for students, and indeed I would go beyond that, I would say, for the entire school community. I think it's hugely important. I think, you know, the experience of COVID-19 has created challenges for all of us, and so I include the widest of school community in relation to the need to resource and to support from a wellbeing point of view. But specifically, as you've referenced, this particular cohort of students who will take the Leaving Certificate next year, I want to be very clear, even in the budget in October, I was conscious of the need for supports in terms of making additional school counsellors available, and I was very pleased that more than 100 additional posts in terms of guidance were being provided and worked through into our schools. Equally so, I've referenced earlier the provision of a substantial number of additional NEPS psychologists, and indeed NEPS have been working and are working with schools in terms of rolling out specific programmes that identify and promote and enhance the existing wellbeing structures within our schools.